I want to introduce, I'm very pleased to have her on board here. We have Dr. Allyson McQuinn. She's a doctor that treats people with, behavioral problems. Would that be a good way to say that?
That's correct. Most of my patients can range from people who suffer allergies right down to big, much more neurotic, even psychotic behaviors. Yeah.
Here's what do you mind if I call you Allyson?
No, please.
Allyson, here's what I'd like to do. If we could just talk in some general terms about your practice and how it came about. Then if we could move on to, in this city right now, there's a big issue, of course, with a recent counselor that's in some very legal difficulties, to say the least. Of course, along with that goes, there's many citizens and children also in some very difficult times here. So we'd like to address that and talk about that so we can get a better understanding because, right now what we're seeing is the face of the legal system. Mm-hmm. And I truly believe that we need to look a little deeper into this and have a better understanding, not so much just from the perspective for the violator, but for peace of mind of parents and children and the community as a whole, if we could.
Yeah, with pleasure. So my whole journey began, I was a financial advisor with the federal government almost 20 years ago. So that's just an indication that I'm very left-brained. And I gave birth to a baby 2 months premature. And when we delayed his MMR vaccine, we gave it about 15 months. Typically, it's at 12 months. He went into the autism spectrum, and this was devastating for me because I did not know how to solve it. Medical personnel just recommended that we put him on drugs for the rest of his childhood and kind of suppress or manage the issue. And while I didn't stand up always for myself, when you have a baby that you love and you want to solve the issue at the root unequivocally, I went on a journey and a mission to resolve that. It became the fodder for my first book, The Path to Cure the Whole Art of Healing. To resolve Jordan's issues outright, we used a homeopathic system that I now practice called Heilkunst, which is a German word that means whole art of science and curing. And so by applying these principles, we were able to resolve the underlying cause, to my surprise as well. This was not what I expected the outcome to be, so imagine how thrilled I was. And then I went on a journey to resolve my own issues. My mother had committed suicide when I was 8 years old because of schizophrenia and manic depression. And so because I understood that Jordan's issues were actually also linked to my mom's issues, I wanted to resolve that outright, cure it, get rid of it, and never see it again. So as a result, he brought me to my life's path and took me into medical ergonomy, which is resolving emotional issues that are of a very deep and pathological nature to cure them and not just manage them.
Now, what do you mean by a pathological nature?
Well, it means in essence that the person feels like they don't have any choice for these horrible behaviors. We use incarceration. We charge them to the extent of the law. We put them away, and then we use surveillance to monitor them. Well, this is a very outside-in approach. You've not cured anything. You've given the illusion that the symptoms are gone, but that person's not whole and healthy. They're not self-governing. They are being managed from the outside in.
So would it be safe to say then, parents in general, let's talk about parents and the deviant behavior of some members of our society. Is it safe to say then that parents have a right to be concerned when, these I don't know how else to say it, these criminals that have gone through the justice system for deviant behavior do their time and then are released? Yeah. Do parents have a right to be concerned over this?
Absolutely, because it's a bit like a train that the switch has been pulled and they're running down a course without any brakes. They don't want to perpetrate. If you really look at this situation in a great depth and you ask them, and I know because I've worked with criminals in the past and individuals who are in perpetrating with their own children, They don't want to. They feel possessed. That's the thing. And that's what I mean about pathological behavior, is that they don't always have the means to resolve this outright. So they're attempting to manage, anger programs and all the rest of it. It's the same as a person who's an alcoholic. They often they'll trade it in for religion, but it's still a management program. It's not an all-out cure where the person knows within themselves they have no capacity to perpetuate this behavior.
You say that, they don't want to do it. But what manifests the behavior in the first place?
Yeah. Well, and that would take more hours than we have
yes,
today.
Probably.
Yeah. Because you're looking at a whole dynamic. You're looking at genetic issues coming down the family line. And this is why I don't get invited to a lot of cocktail parties, but syphilis, gonorrhea, these diseases have never been cured outright. They've been managed. We'd give mercury cream to somebody 70 years ago that had sores on their genitals. Well, that's not a resolution. That just drove the disease deeper into the somatic layer and into the psyche. So this is what we've used thus far to try and resolve these issues, and it's not worked. And what I know about children that have suffered at the hands of these perpetrators is they often become perpetrators themselves in their adulthood. Because what's happening is the individual gets pinioned under the trauma. It's like they're 2 or 3 years of age. It's very healthy for us as children to play in the sandbox and then, in our tree fort, and to explore one another in a healthy way, sexually, emotionally, and spiritually. And if that's never suppressed, we grow up and unfold to be very healthy human beings and adults. And we would never think to hurt another human being. But these individuals are stuck under those traumas. And that's why I'm saying, too, that talk therapy doesn't always help, because you're dealing with issues that got cemented below decks before they were able to actually speak, between birth and age 3. You can only go back as far as you have memory or cognition to be able to arrest and cure and resolve these issues.
Do we have any understanding right now under the current treatment regimen that's generally used within the justice system? What's the repeat offender?
Mm-hmm. I wish I could give you an actual number, but I just know from studying individuals like Dr. Wilhelm Reich, and who practiced medical orgonomy or developed the system, and Branislaw Malinowski, that it's very high, unfortunately. And from what I know intimately working with patients and children and mothers, is that, people, I'm thinking of a mom down in the States I'm working with right now. She hates the thoughts that she's having. Her mom died of cancer a number of years ago, and she was wrongly put in the head of the family at 7 years old. What I'm seeing right now is skewed behaviors, and she's terrified, with the way she feels towards her daughter. Well, her daughter is her. With all those unresolved anger and resentment, and being kind of woken up to take responsibility before she was even really allowed to be a child.
So we're really talking about a whole range of behavioral problems, not just perversion.
It's very dynamic.
So it all goes back, do you believe, to the same root causes?
Well, it does. And like I say, it's a dynamic root cause, the way that we're raised, the way we're conditioned, the way we're mentored by people that we trust, including teachers and parents, of course. And when there is that wrong behavior, the individual ends up with trauma, and they are literally stuck and pinioned in their development until that can be arrested, cured, and resolved. And yeah, I use that word because I understand the root cause, and that's the result that I see. And I'm sure I'll be taken to task for it. But
so really, my take on this, depending on the individual, obviously, there's a range of, some kids that grow up to be adults are little troublemakers, and we say, well, a little troublemaker. That's one manifestation of it. And then it could go to the extreme of being a child molester, pedophile.
And these are the individuals that are suppressed under the expectations of obligations. So if I say, don't touch, rather than my child saying, well, I'm not going to touch because I know that I'm going to get hurt, it's a very different gesture. And that is what a whole, and this is important, I think, really important, is that we can't really measure where on the spectrum a person is in their disease matrix until we define whole and healthy. And that's why I went into this field, was I went and did a postgraduate research. And how do we define health? Well, health is, and this is the subject of my second book, Unfolding the Essential Self, From Rage to Orgastic Potency, is that I wanted to understand how can you take an enraged human being and outright resolve those issues of a very dynamic nature, including genetic miasms, behavioral issues, and then convert it into whole health. And I don't mean orgastically potent just in the boudoir. I mean in every aspect of your life. Do you love who you are? Do you love what you're doing? Are you fully engaged and turned on by, your relationships? This is really important. So then you can understand where this switch got mired with regards to these individuals. They're down on this scale, and we need to actually convert that rage into love, romantic love.
How do we compare as a region to the rest of the country or worldwide?
This is why I moved here. Because I've traveled the world. I'm from Ottawa, Ontario, but my birth family is from Sussex. And I came back here for a reason. It is the most armored. It is the most difficult place. My mentors ask me, why in God's name would you go to New Brunswick? You're crazy. And I say, I love it because it's the most difficult. There's a naturopath, a homeopath, and on every corner in BC. California, that's the place everybody wants to be. I did my postgraduate out of Santa Barbara, California. And my mentor there, he's like, why would you choose New Brunswick? I said, because I love it.
So it's more, are you saying it's more widely accepted out west?
Oh, yeah. Big time. And people, they don't even want the government out there. Back off. We're going to figure things out for ourselves. Those doctors, they're just prescribing, vaccines and drugs. That doesn't solve the underlying cause. That's suppressive and palliative. I'll go see somebody who helps me leverage this issue, consciously.
Why is St. John so armored?
And I love this question because it takes me a bit into history. But most of us came from England, Ireland, and Scotland. We were thrown out of the penal system the same as Australia. We were one of the colonies, right? And individuals with a great deal of health and voyeurism, they headed inland and out west. And these individuals, they, took the trees down and they built settlements.
Physically and mentally, they were strong.
Exactly. But those of us that stayed here on the coast, we have a real love-hate with the government. We hate them, but we really want them to look after us, That's the way our state of mind. And so when I went through my own education, at the Hahnemann College for Heilkunst and homeopathy, as well as going on to do my postgraduate research, I wanted to be like the country doctor because I remembered, aunts and uncles suffering issues. My grandfather was put in a mental institution really to die. Every aunt and uncle on my mother's side have ended up with serious pathology of a schizophrenic nature. I'm here to resolve the underlying cause. That's what I'm ordained to do. Right? Is it uncomfortable? My son Jordan said at dinner last night, he's my son that was in the autistic spectrum. He's 18 now. He goes, Mom, you be very careful because I don't want to have to build the pyre when you get home because they want to burn you at the stake. New Brunswick is a hard place to be.
Yeah, but having myself, I've lived, across North America, actually, in a variety of... The Atlantic coast of Canada is really no different than the Atlantic coast of the States as well. You see that down there as well.
Very true.
And as you go across to the Midwest, it's a much different attitude amongst the people.
Yeah.
And I would say they were the same ilk. They were the physically strong, the mentally strong,
True.
Could endure hostile climates and geographical locations.
Down here, I'm always asked, Allie, how do you sustain the charge of not being accepted by medicine and by psychotherapeutic, traditional psychotherapeutic groups? And I say, well, because my patients and most of my colleagues are international, I work in integrative medicine with hospitals down in the States. Dr. Len Levine is a St. Johnner, was part of the Canadian Medical Association. He has studied the same program I have. He's a chiropractor, an MD. He's in his late 60s and 70s. He's one of my closest, dearest friends. He graduated in the same program I did at the Hahnemann College for Homeopathy and Heilkunst out of Ottawa. It's an international program. And so there's an underground operation that is actually coming to the fore. It's just that New Brunswick is I would say 40 years behind the rest of North America, at least.
Is the underground, as you say, underground society in regards to accepting this, is it a younger generation or older generation?
It's both, unfortunately. And again, that's why I consider myself a bit of a change agent, because those individuals, this school of thought really is still, I see it in young people as well. My son will tell you that the young lasses he's dating are very suppressed and very, very angry and have a lot of issues emotionally and spiritually. That brings up my third book, Sophie. It's called Sophie's Truth, How a Young Girl Unfolded Her Essential Self. It's actually about a young girl, and it's a culmination of all of the work I've done with teenagers in my own practice. And she's very suppressed. She's from the Maritimes, and her parents tell her they're terrified she's ever going to get pregnant. This is their modus operandi. And, of course, they're not allowing her to unfold into her emotional and sexual self, and she has to go off to Europe for the summer to solve it.
Now, you did mention a lot of your patients are international patients.
Yeah.
What we're going to do, if we may, Allyson, we're going to take a quick break here. You're listening to Greater St. John Today. I'm speaking with Dr. Allyson McQuinn, talking about, I guess, treatment of the root causes of behavioral problems. In particular, we're concentrating on some local issues as well. You're listening to Greater St. John Today. We'll be back in a moment.
You're listening to Greater St. John Today on Legends 103.
Welcome back to Greater St. John Today. I'm your host, John Campbell, and of course we have the pleasure of having Dr. Allyson McQuinn in with us, and we're talking about the root causes to some real sad behavioral problems here, not only here, but of course it happens around the world, but we're really concentrated in this area. Now, you had mentioned, and I say around the world, you mentioned before we went to break, that many of your current clients are international clients. Mm-hmm. Do they travel here to St. John, New Brunswick? I mean, we all complain about the flights here getting into St. John. So what?
And out.
Yeah.
No, she uses Skype.
Yeah, it's true. You're right. So when I moved back, I was concerned because I wasn't sure how people would perceive my work here. I have a sister clinic that we're connected to over in St. John's, Newfoundland, and Molly Graham is from Toronto, and she said, "Oh, Allie, you'll love it down here. People are going to receive you very well, and they won't always understand exactly what you're doing or how you're doing it, but they will bring you every cousin, aunt, uncle." And that in truth is what has happened, is that it is entirely word of mouth. When I moved down here, 90% of our practice was international. Those individuals that I treated in Ottawa became Skype and phone clients. They just converted. And I would say now I'm 60-70% more international. I'm seeing that many more local patients, which excites me because I've met, I love treating, they make sense to me, because they are me. And I feel like I'm back home.
Yeah. When they come to you, are they hard-headed about therapy with you?
Not typically. They're individuals that are searching for answers that have not found them in the allopathic realm. So the drugs are not working. They still have underlying symptoms. They just sense sometimes that they want to be able to have more than the opportunity to ask one question. My initial consultations take 2 hours to unfold. So it's a very thorough opportunity to explore chief complaints, past issues, regimen, diet, exercise, water. These are all important for creating the underpinnings of resolving sequentially the underlying cause. So we take them like an onion and strip the emotional, physical shocks and traumas off in the order in which they've been assumed, and then we get to those ugly genetic miasms coming down the family line. So it's interesting because the people that react mostly to the perpetrators, the angriest people and the most destabilized people, are my perfect clients, because they have an element of themselves they're not facing that they're resonating with the ugliness of those perpetrators. And it's important to resolve the underlying cause.
So you've alluded to the fact that your business locally is being gradually more accepted.
Yeah, it's been 2 years and 2 months since we moved here. And my husband and I work together, so we are one and the same.
When you look at your customer base,
yep.
Obviously we can't get into who's who, but when you look at your customer base, is it growing in lines of family? For example, an aunt goes to you and then she refers on other members of the family. Is that how it's growing, or
yeah.
is it people outside the family group that are being referred to you and saying, God, you have a problem, you should go see Dr. McQuinn?
Well, my patients are 80-90% women, right? Women communicate and commune on that level. So if a woman hears and sees that another woman's getting huge success, and this is what I love, is that you see it. And I'll always ask my patients in their follow-ups, what have other people said about you? Like, how have you changed? And they'll always say, somebody said I look amazing. My eyes are brighter. My skin pinker. I just look more healthy. And the things that I'm saying, stuff doesn't stress me out anymore. These are the typical comments I get. So when you see those results, it becomes kind of, well, that person wants to know, how the heck did you get those results? And it seems so simple.
Okay, let's look at a root cause here then. If you're saying it's mostly women that you have, why is it men aren't as open to this? What's the root cause to that?
Yeah, do you want to know?
Well, let's do the battle of the sexes here.
All right, I love talking about this. Okay, so what happens at puberty is your voice drops, right? Why does that happen? An octave, a whole octave. Men become much more rooted in the earth. Your genitals drop, Think about it. You become more mechanistic and materialistic in the way you're thinking. You have to. You're more connected to physics in its traditional sense. What you see will only give you the results-based, mechanistic way of seeing things. Our voices, women, are much higher, right? Our babies hear our voices first because we're much more cosmically connected. We always say, honey, don't worry about it. It's going to be fine. And they're like, how does she have the secret information that we're not going to go hungry by the end of the month? And, of course, it always is. It's just fine. See, women are just much more naturally spiritual. And that's the thing, is that Heilkunst is very innovative. It's a whole art of healing and curing art. For example, the cancer state of mind is rescuing others to the exclusion of self, or the unlived life. You have to use intuition to be able to diagnose that. And dia means through, knowing, from the Greek. And most men think that's airy-fairy or call me, all kinds of, I'm a witch doctor to some, voodoo medicine. I hear all of these things. But I'm so happy that I get the opportunity to actually resolve the root cause issues in women and in their children.
Yeah, and I might throw this in, correct me if I'm wrong, but men seem to be more connected to the physical. Mm-hmm. You hear that story a lot of times when, you teach a man to fish, he feeds a family because he's physically doing it.
Yeah.
But if you educate a woman, which is, I guess, the higher, she'll feed a nation.
Yeah. Nicely said. And this brings us right to the point of what it is that you want to discuss today in our pre-interview, is that men have been using that brawn and mechanistic forcefulness to protect us for 5,000 years. You know, that animus nature that you are is something to be cherished, because, you know, I would trust that if we're in the castle and I'm inside and there's forces coming from everywhere, that you are going to use all that training to protect myself and the children. It's just that since the advent of the light bulb, what's happened is that we've gone into our heads. We've become very intellectual. You know, we sit at desks for hours during the course of the day. Well, what happened to the animus? What happened to that sexuality, that brawn, that thrust behind our mechanistic men? Well, it often comes out in skewed behavior, because you're told to be a good boy. You sit down at that desk, you behave. You know, all education is really designed to create female teachers, if you think about it. We're not all Anne Shirleys. You know, men do better based on... there's a great book called Boys Adrift by Dr. Sachs, and he talks about how boys do a lot better when they're educated together, you know, rolling around the classroom, lying on the floor if they feel like it, because they're very physical. And we don't want to beat this out of our men. We want to convert it. And what's happened in our modern society is we see this skewed sexual behavior because we're attempting to turn men into women. It's wrong. You know, it's even the phthalates in plastic water bottles, for example, have estrogens in them. We're castrating our men. We don't want that.
And there has been recent studies showing that boys do better in all male classes. Mm-hmm. We used to have school here, and it used to be called St. Max.
Yeah.
My sister was one of the first females to break down the doors to get there as a student. I guess that was part of the downfall.
Well, and we take physical education right out of the curriculum. Shit, like the next thing now you've done is you've actually suppressed another aspect of that brawn. And our physiologies, I'm talking on a physical, mechanistic, materialistic standpoint, are not designed to take all of this suppression.
Okay, so let's go to the root of our issue here in St. John, New Brunswick. What's going through the heads of, you know, a guy that becomes a pedophile? Where does that manifest itself from?
Yeah, well, it's a very syphilitic gesture. It's a very... gonorrhea is horrible terms, but on the basis of like cures like, these are the diseases that we're faced with. And it's a bit like a train going down a hill with no brakes. The switch has been switched, and they're off on this path where they actually feel possessed. You know, it is likened very much to a possession. You know, when I was in my clinical studies, we had to watch movies like The Exorcism. It wasn't pretty, you know, and very scary and very but, you know, as a clinician, as a physician, you're going to be facing these things. You don't want to walk away or risk suppressing. You have to get underlying to the root cause and actually cure it outright for these individuals to ever know self-governance and freedom.
Are they born this way? Or are they...
It's a whole, again, dynamic...
Or is it through, you know, a particular...
Yeah. They are often... it's a karmic issue. Yeah, and I could get into Rudolf Steiner and anthroposophical medicine, which is going to take, it would take hours and days. But in essence, these individuals are almost pre-programmed, and it is part of the genetic miasm they're born with. But genetic miasms have an energetic frequency, which means that I will actually end up in situation that will perpetuate that same spiritual disease over and over and over again on the basis of physics, the law of resonance. And these individuals, unfortunately, will end up in situations, and I see it all the time because I'm stripping a lot of timelines, is that syphilis coming down a family line will breed a lot of accidents, insidious forms of self-destruction, near misses, whereas cancer looks like a lot of losses during the course of somebody's life. Loss of the dog, loss of a grandfather, it's all losses.
When we talk about this behavior, that obviously to none of us is acceptable.
No.
And it, obviously, I would think if they were in the right mind, would not be acceptable to them.
Exactly.
Of course, the first thing is justice takes its course. We have laws in place to try and protect children, for example, in this situation. Once they're into the justice system, what should be happening? How should we be treating them?
Yeah.
Because you will have the thought, and citizens out there, and they've done it in this city, hang the bee,
Yeah.
castrate,
Yeah.
lock them away and throw away the keys. And what happens is, of course, we know here in Canada that our justice system, the guy may be sentenced or her to 5 years or 10 years. They'll be out in half that, generally, and expected to come back into society. And parents, in general, I'm a grandfather. I don't have confidence in the justice system putting out somebody that is, and to me, and I know this personally myself, I believe this, I should say, that many of and I'll use the term perverts, many of them are caught, seem to be in mid-age. So to me, it would indicate to me this is a behavior that's been ongoing. So it's not like it's a first time for them. It's very rare that we catch this type of behavior with a 21-year-old or 23-year-old. Yeah. And that's probably because we just haven't caught them. It's usually when you hear them and you read it in the paper and on the news, these guys are in their 40s to right up to their 70s in most cases. And I suspect myself that this ain't their first time.
Yeah.
It's been an ongoing thing. They've left a trail of misery, which is another whole group of victims that are going to, I think, have behavioral problems as we go too.
Yeah. And it's a huge, huge issue. In Sophie's Truth, my third book that I wrote, I describe an event that I heard about through local St. John police, where a man took his wife to church and then headed off to a brothel and was caught with his pants down around his ankles. And the next thing you know, he's begging, "Please, I've got to pick up my wife at church at 11 o'clock. These perversions, unfortunately, are really the symptoms of an infected mind. And these individuals have been suppressed from childhood when the trauma occurred in their own history, usually of a sexual origin. And I often will see it with, moms even that hit little boys. Traditionally, that was a very, if you have your hand down your pants or you're acting inappropriate, like smack. Well, that is a horrible thing to do to a child who's trying to unfold naturally with regards to a healthy, romantic, loving sexual behavior, because now they have the feeling they're going to be slapped, but it's affection. To them, their skewed minds have interpreted this. So what happens is they grow up perpetuating the same behavior over and over again, expecting to be slapped. And when it happens, they're not surprised when they're, taken to task. They expect it because, again, like that train going down that track, when the switch gets pulled and it's derailed and the brakes are actually applied from the outside, from society, they're not typically surprised. They've expected it, like the slap from their mother or their father when they were a child.
Yeah, and funny you mentioned. It's not funny you mentioned it. I went to school here in St. John, New Brunswick, and without going into who ran the school and all that good stuff, we as boys, it's very hard for us to urinate without using our hands.
Really?
Almost damn impossible.
Yeah.
Unlike our female counterparts.
Yeah.
And at the school, we were, and I shouldn't say it was throughout the school, but in the classes I happened to be in, of course, they actually put washroom facilities right in the classroom. It was shared between two classrooms in between. And we were very strongly discouraged about touching ourselves in order to urinate. And many times, many of the boys urinated all over themselves because, you're a 7-year-old boy. It's not like it's very limited what you're handling there to be able to urinate. But so I could see this being an issue in suppressing some problems here.
Very nicely said, because you're right. It extends, it's so far-reaching in our culture, and most of us who are, I'm 50 this year, and that's what I end up seeing, is that individuals who have been suppressed at this juncture, when we're actually working to convert our growth forces into a much more wisdom-bearing age, is that individuals end up with skewed behaviors.
Just before we break here, I just want one quick question for you. When we're talking about these pedophiles, for example, we're not advocating that they shouldn't be going through the justice system and pay the price that society has sentenced them to.
No. But what I'm suggesting is that let's apprehend the child that's been harmed and been hurt. And let's resolve the issue at its root cause while they're still labile and flexible enough to be able to grow up whole and healthy and not have that schism of trauma in their cellular memory of a physical, emotional, and spiritual nature.
On that note, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Greater St. John Today. I have Dr. Allyson McQuinn in here, and we're speaking about behavioral issues. We'll be back in a moment.
You're listening to Greater St. John Today on Legends 103.
Welcome back to Greater St. John Today. I'm your host, John Campbell, and of course, I have the pleasure of having Dr. Allyson McQuinn in with me today. We're talking about a wide scope of behavioral issues, going right back to our ancestors it started. But now we're into the meat and potatoes here of issues here in the city of St. John, and our most important concern is for our children. It's been important to the show. We've done many shows in relationship to children and their care and custody. I would think we would be breaking this down to a couple of subgroups when we're talking about the children. Of course, there are those that were physically and emotionally damaged or I guess harmed. And then, of course, there's those children emotionally through association. Could we address those? How should parents be reacting to this? Because that's one of the concerns I get from parents as I talk on the streets to many of them is, John, where do I go? What do I say to my child? Because obviously, in my view, is we're not going to eliminate all the damage down the road, but I think we need to try and eliminate it or eliminate it as much as possible.
Yeah, and. It's, again, a dynamic question because every individual that's been subject to a situation like that will react differently. Some more what we call IQ constitutions, individuals that live more in their heads. They don't get their energy from being with people. EQs, for example, will rail. They'll express their anger. They're much more, like me. They'll actually say what they feel, and often these issues can be transmuted from hate, from grief, from fear, from resentment, guilt, shame, and can be actually converted into self-love. It can be an opportunity really to work with your child on a level that you never have before. Suppression is never the answer. Ignoring the issue is never the answer. Palliation, hoping it'll go away, is never the answer. And if you need help with that, God, there's, my husband, Jeff Corntair, and I specialize in this area. I'm so happy to give parents a leg up in this area.
Yeah, because I would assume, if you're ignoring it or that, and let's say, let's pick an age, the child's 6 or 7, I think you're just putting it off to the child's going to be 18, 19, 20, and a lot of
and then you see those
anger.
Behaviors. Yeah, exactly.
And then these people that we say, that bad boy is really something that should have been taken care of 10 years before.
Yeah, and read my second book if that interests you, for Unfolding the Essential Self, From Rage to Orgastic Potency. If you have any concerns, a lot of the answers are in there about how I use medical ergonomy, which is modern psychotherapeutics, to actually release the rage from the actual human being. The armor will occur in what we call the ocular block first, the way the person sees the world, and they become pinioned. Next thing you know, they'll shut off. in the oral block. And the next thing you know, you see a lot of jaw tension. People with frozen faces are the people to be most concerned about. Homo normalis, as Wilhelm Reich said, is the person you're most concerned about, the person that you perceive as managing the most. You know, you've got to be concerned about medical doctors, lawyers, police. These are the individuals, and it's sad to say, but this is where I see a lot of this behavior show up. They've done what was expected of society, and they've been suppressing a lot of that animus for a long time. And I know because I treat these individuals.
And that would that be a part because they've, they are being oppressed in certain ways and directed into something that they become people of positions of power. That's
right. And people trust them. They take on positions of false authority.
But don't you find that when a child is victimized, that the parents kind of say, oh, that didn't happen, he's fine?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's in essence why we're in the mess that we're in. And it's very, very much, again, and I hate to say it, but it's a New Brunswick state of mind, is that just pretend it's not happened.
It's not happened.
Yeah.
Because I would think, when parents do deny that, it's kind of, they don't want to accept that possibly they could have let that child down.
Exactly.
Would be one thing, because I know... God forbid, if it ever happened to somebody close to me, I would feel some guilt thinking, did I do everything?
Yeah. And that's
another issue because you got the parents. But I just want to go back to the children for one moment, and let's talk about the ones just emotionally. Because in St. John here, of course, it was through various social nonprofit organizations, and more children were not as physically assaulted, but are emotionally damaged through this. What do parents do there? Is it a different process? Is it?
I would say that it's similar. It's just in different degrees. If you've been actually physically abused, that's very, very serious. And there's going to be a whole host of emotions. There's going to be what we say all four. Grief, anger, fear, even harbored rage, resentment, shame. They'll often think, that's important too, is that the child will often think, what did I do to make this happen? Like they'll take it on as it's their fault.
Yeah, what did I do wrong?
What did I do wrong that had this person harm me? A child will generally take that posturing. And that is very concerning because if that gets trapped underground and their development does not get to unfold naturally, you'll see that attempt to make up and become a pleaser throughout society until the rage becomes so heightened that it will skew psychotic, and you'll get psychotic behavior. That's scary stuff.
Now the children that are affected emotionally because of the association, what would you say to handle them? Because, I'm sure trust is going to be a big issue for them.
Yeah, and it can be. Other children...
And that would affect their future relationships, I'm assuming.
Absolutely. And their future relationships with men, for example, if the man was the perpetrator. For the little girls, there may be big trust issues. And again, too, if I'm a young boy and I want to come into myself and I have that as a model, it can really skew the way that I naturally unfold. It becomes what we call a traumatism. And again, the life force becomes pinioned under that event until it's wholly resolved. And that's why I use curative medicine like homeopathic principles to resolve it outright, is that we want it gone.
Let's talk about the parents a minute, because obviously they're going through this as well. Some of them are going to feel guilt that maybe they didn't protect their child enough.
Yeah.
What should parents be doing to try? Obviously, we've talked about them reaching out to try and get their children help. Yeah. But what about themselves?
Well, and that's really, really important as well, because if I'm resonating with fear or anger or resentment, that's more about my individual issue that I have that's been triggered by this huge charge. We have these events in order to evolve our consciousness during the course of our lives, and we can do one of two things, or we can bury it and try to suppress it, or we can use that opportunity really to evolve our own selves and aid our children through that. So everybody's an individual, and everybody will react differently. And so my hope is that with my relationship with my own children, that I have cultivated a deep, loving relationship where they can expose anything that they're feeling. See, my children brought up in this particular environment of exploration will face these issues and come and say to me, Mom, I feel enraged about this. What do I do? Well, as a medical ergonomist, I say, well, let's get that rage out of there. And often they'll lie down on a bed and throw a 2-year-old tantrum and scream, no, 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 or express, I hate you, with what seems like violence, but do it in an environment that's whole and healthy and controlled now, rather than it coming out in skewed, perverse ways later on. And this was what Wilhelm Reich was all about. He wrote the books, The Function of the Orgasm, for a reason, because he wanted to know that there are answers through psychotherapeutics, not talk therapy, but true psychotherapeutics.
If I may, and this is, of course, we're talking about St. John in particular. A lot of underlying issues here in St. John when it comes to families and raising a family. Poverty is one of them. We know from previous cases, not just here in St. John, it happens all over the world, that children are kind of, I guess, pointed out to be a possible victim because of their social economic standing, the relationship within their families. How much of a factor is that when it comes to... well, I guess what I'm saying is, how do families in that situation deal with this?
Yeah.
Because many of them don't have the tools to deal with it.
Yeah, and it's very true, and it's unfortunate. It's interesting to me from a medical point of view is that talking about those awful genetic miasms, syphilis, actually there's what we call a pathic offshoot. One of those diseases is aurum metallicum. Aurum metallicum is the state that we give for people in poverty, even a suicidal situation, where their lack of value has been brought to the fore. Aurum metallicum is the Latin term for gold. So it's fascinating to me that our inner value actually is mirrored as our outer value. So if I have a strong sense of myself, if I have a strong base of knowledge, because really it's not the house, the fancy car, or the trip south that create the value of an integral value of a human being. The only thing you can take with you past this earthly life is knowledge. And that's the only thing that you really own, if you think about it. So people from different economic backgrounds, I know some of the most amazing mothers who brought their children to me for treatment and themselves on social assistance because it was a priority. They were in a situation similar to this, and they wanted this issue resolved outright. And I, was very, very awestruck by this behavior. So again, you can't give a kind of a blanket approach or solution to these issues. It's an individual basis, and it depends on the character structure of the individuals, the way that they'll react and the way they deal with it.
On more, I guess, common terms, a situation we have here in St. John, many family members were outright upset at the way the authorities were handling it and providing some help and assistance. What should we do in the initial stage when something like this breaks out? It shocks the city, a well-trusted and respected member of our society, having access to so many possible victims. What should we initially be doing as a community?
Yeah, it's interesting because Reich also wrote a book called People in Trouble. And while I would love to be able to resolve this for every individual or the perpetrators even, it's not feasible and not possible. But where I want and love to step in is let's start with the children. You know, those individuals that were victimized. If the parents are having a hard time and they feel the child is struggling, you know, let's give them a leg up to resolve this so that another generation doesn't become the perpetrators with skewed sexual behaviors where they're hurting others. You know, really, that's the best place from my standpoint that we step in.
So we got to get this early.
Yeah.
Because when they're 7, 8 years of age now, when they become 19, 20,
yeah.
And if some of them should be overly affected, it could lead down to the path that at 50 years of age, we're finding out we're arresting them,
yeah.
And they have a long history.
Well, stats will show you right. They have a strong inclination to perpetuate the same behavior that was done to them.
We're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Greater St. John Today. I'm your host, John Campbell. I'm speaking with Dr. Allyson McQuinn, and we'll be back in a moment.
You're listening to Greater St. John Today on Legends 103.
Welcome back to Greater St. John Today. I'm your host, John Campbell. Of course, I'm speaking with Dr. Allyson McQuinn about behavioral problems and, of course, as it relates to some recent developments here in the city of St. John. This show was not intended to provide any solutions to everything. It was meant as an informational show just to let our public know out there, and the listening public, especially parents of children that find themselves in a situation where they believe they're going to be facing some issues, that there are alternatives out there. There are courses of action that they can take as a family, as an extended member of the family. If you recognize any behavior that should be addressed, there are courses of action that you can take and be able to reach out. Now, you yourself, you treat many international patients as well through technology. How do people get a hold of you to get any assistance if they so choose?
Yeah, most people will find us through our website. We write monthly newsletters, and my website address is www.arcanum.ca. Arcanum is spelled A-R-C-A-N as in Nancy, U-M as in mother. Arcanum means spirit and matter. And it is the opportunity to call us locally at 506-638-9331. And like I say, my husband, Jeff Corntear, and he's actually doing a double PhD. I don't know what would bring him to that. But again, it's always our goal to be learning as much as we possibly can to be able to resolve these issues outright.
Allyson, I want to thank you very much for coming on our show today. This is a topic we could spend hours on to get into the more meat of it, but I'm glad you were able to give us an hour of your time to go over some of this very essential information that needs to get out there.